A cry cut through the night like shattered glass. A voice that had commanded boardrooms, media outlets, and entire industries broke into a whisper soaked with desperation. "Someone help me. I can't fix this." From the shadows came an answer, deep, ragged, and steady. "I can fix it." That reply didn't come from a chauffeur, an assistant, or any of the countless employees who followed orders for a living. It came from a man crouched beneath a bridge, his hair tangled, his coat ripped at the seams, his face lined with the kind of stories people usually turn away from. Alexander Gray, billionaire, owner of glittering skyscrapers and fleets of cars, turned toward the figure with disbelief. The rich man who was supposed to have everything was stranded in the rain, helpless, while the one the world ignored claimed he could fix what Alexander could not. It began with a car. The engine of Alexander's newest machine had groaned and died just as the storm grew heavier. He had slammed the steering wheel, not out of fear of being late, but because the silence in that car was deafening. He wasn't cursing the machine. He was cursing the hollow truth he had been running from. Money had bought him walls of glass, yet inside those towers, he was alone. His wife had left years ago, his daughter avoided him, his friends were people who clinked champagne glasses but vanished when the lights went out. And now, when he muttered, "I can't fix this," he hadn't meant the car. He meant his life. The homeless man stepped forward, water dripping from the brim of his hood. He carried nothing but a weathered bag and a pair of hands that looked like they had worked for decades. "Pop the hood," he said simply. Alexander hesitated, ready to dismiss him. "You? You can't even fix your own life," he scoffed, instantly regretting the cruelty in his tone. But the man didn't flinch. He wiped his hands on his trousers, took out a rusty wrench, and leaned over the engine. The rain poured harder, yet his focus never wavered. Within minutes, the engine roared back to life. Alexander stared in shock. This wasn't luck. This was skill, patience, experience. He pulled out his wallet. "How much?" The man shook his head. "Not everything broken needs money. Some things need understanding." Those words stayed lodged in Alexander's chest even as he drove away. A billionaire was used to buying silence, obedience, even affection. But for the first time in years, he felt someone had spoken to the man, not the money. That night, Alexander lay awake in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling. The city glittered below him, but it all felt artificial. He replayed the stranger's words. Some things need understanding. By dawn, he couldn't resist. He drove back to that same bridge. There he was. The man, feeding scraps of bread to a stray dog, smiling as though the world hadn't abandoned him. His name was Daniel. No titles, no estates, no stock market symbols attached to him. Just Daniel. Alexander approached with his usual armor of pride, pulling out bills again. Daniel laughed softly.
"Keep it."
"You think money is the glue for every crack. That's why you're miserable." That hit like a punch. Alexander wasn't used to being seen through. He demanded to know why Daniel chose to live this way. Daniel told him his story, not with bitterness, but with honesty. Once, he had been a mechanic known for fixing anything with wheels and gears. He had a wife who adored him and a daughter who painted his world bright. But life unraveled. An accident, bills piling up, choices made in despair. His wife died, his daughter was taken away, and his hands that once built dreams were left with nothing but broken machines under highway bridges. Yet he wasn't bitter. He carried a broken watch on his wrist, one that had stopped years ago. "This was hers," Daniel said, glancing at the scratched glass. "It doesn't tick anymore, but I wear it because it reminds me that not everything broken should be thrown away. Sometimes it just needs patience, even if it never runs again." Alexander couldn't look away. This man had every reason to collapse into anger, but instead he laughed with stray dogs, offered food to strangers, and fixed cars without expecting payment. For the first time in his life, Alexander felt jealous of someone who slept on cardboard. He asked Daniel why he helped him earlier. Daniel shrugged. "Because you looked more broken than the car." The words stung like truth often does. Alexander wanted to argue, to defend himself, but he couldn't. He was broken, more broken than he had admitted to himself. He found himself returning again, night after night. He would sit on the damp ground, listening to Daniel talk about life in a way that stripped away every wall Alexander had built. Daniel taught him the beauty of noticing small things, the sound of rain on tin, the wag of a stray dog's tail, the warmth of half a sandwich shared between two people who had nothing but that moment. One evening, Alexander confessed, "I thought being rich meant being invincible. But I can't fix my marriage, I can't fix my daughter's hatred, I can't fix the emptiness inside me." His voice cracked. For a man who had silenced competition in courtrooms and demanded attention in conference halls, the tremor in his voice sounded foreign. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes calm but fierce. Machines break. People break. The trick is not pretending they don't. The trick is asking the right hands for help. He paused, then smiled faintly. "You asked tonight. That means you're ready." For the first time in years, Alexander didn't feel like a man drowning in his own wealth. He felt like a student, sitting before a teacher who had no diploma, no fortune, but more wisdom than all his advisors combined. He whispered, almost childlike, "Then teach me. Not how to fix engines, but how to fix myself." Daniel studied him, as though weighing his soul. Then he nodded once, slow and deliberate. "That I can fix." And at that moment, the billionaire who had built empires handed over the reins of his soul to a man the world had dismissed. What unfolded from that night would change not only Alexander's life, but also prove one eternal truth, that sometimes the strongest teachers wear the clothes of the forgotten. Alexander returned to that bridge again and again, no longer as a billionaire trying to solve problems with a checkbook, but as a man stripped of his defenses. Daniel welcomed him with the same calmness every night, sometimes offering only silence, other times words that cut sharper than any business rival ever had. What began as a simple act of curiosity became a journey neither of them had expected. Alexander was forced to leave his comfort zone. Daniel asked him to spend a day without money, to step into the shoes of someone who could not buy their way out of hunger or loneliness. At first, Alexander resisted. For a man who had always been insulated by wealth, stepping into the world without it felt like walking into a storm naked. But he agreed. He spent the day walking the streets, trying to speak to strangers without introducing himself as the tycoon everyone read about in magazines. People brushed past him, some ignored him entirely, others offered polite nods. A few spoke to him without recognition, and in those conversations he found something strange. People listened to him as a man, not as a symbol of wealth. For the first time in years, he wasn't selling, negotiating, or commanding. He was simply being heard. That night, he returned to Daniel with a face humbled by truth. "I've been invisible all this time, haven't I? Behind all the noise, I wasn't seen as me, only as what I owned." Daniel nodded, offering him the broken watch. "Time doesn't stop because the machine fails. It keeps moving. You've been standing still while the world kept going. Maybe now you'll walk again." Alexander cradled the watch as though it were treasure, even though it couldn't tick. He understood the symbolism. He had spent years pausing life, trying to buy moments instead of living them. Their bond deepened. Night after night, Alexander shared confessions he had never spoken aloud. He admitted his fear of growing old alone, his regret for losing touch with his daughter, his shame for treating love like a contract. Daniel listened, never judging, never interrupting. When Alexander broke down and whispered, "I built skyscrapers, but I couldn't build a bridge to my own family," Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. Bridges aren't built with steel. They're built with patience, humility, and love. The same hands that raise towers can still raise forgiveness if you let them. Alexander began to change. Slowly, he spent less time in glittering rooms filled with empty laughter and more time sitting on sidewalks with Daniel, learning the rhythm of an honest life. He learned to share food instead of flaunting it, to greet strangers without expecting deference, to listen without trying to control the outcome. For a man who once lived by profit margins and stock values, these lessons felt like stepping into a new universe. But as the weeks passed, Alexander noticed something about Daniel. The man's strength faltered at times, his hands trembling, his breath shallow. Daniel brushed it off with a smile, saying life was easier when you didn't cling to it too tightly. Yet Alexander's instincts told him something was wrong. He pressed Daniel to see a doctor, to accept help, to let him repay what could never truly be repaid. Daniel resisted. "I didn't fix you for a reward. I did it because I knew what it felt like to be broken and unseen. Don't turn this into a transaction. Some gifts are given, not sold." The words cut deep. But Alexander couldn't ignore the frailty he saw. His wealth, for the first time, had a purpose beyond indulgence. He arranged medical care, shelter, and a chance at stability for Daniel. It took days of persuasion, but finally Daniel agreed, not because he wanted comfort, but because he saw in Alexander's insistence a man who truly cared. Their friendship blossomed into something profound. Daniel became a mentor, a mirror, and at times even a father figure. Alexander became a student, humbled enough to absorb wisdom he once thought beneath him. But fate is often cruel to those who give the most. Daniel's condition worsened despite the care. Lying in a clean bed instead of on the streets, he took Alexander's hand and whispered his final truth. Not everything broken can be fixed. Some things remain cracked, but love makes the cracks beautiful. That's the secret you were chasing. Tears streamed down Alexander's face. The man who had built towers was powerless to stop the frailty of flesh. Daniel's eyes softened, his final act of giving etched in his smile as he pressed the broken watch into Alexander's palm. "Keep it ticking inside you, even if it never ticks again." And with that, Daniel closed his eyes, leaving behind not silence, but an echo that would live forever. "I can fix it." The loss struck Alexander harder than any financial collapse ever could. Yet in that grief, something new was born. He carried Daniel's wisdom like scripture. He reached out to his daughter, not with gifts, but with humility. He listened instead of instructing, apologized instead of defending. The bridge between them, fragile at first, began to form. She saw not the billionaire she had distanced herself from, but a father who finally understood. In Daniel's memory, Alexander redirected his fortune. He built shelters and programs for the homeless, naming the foundation after the man who had taught him more in weeks than he had learned in decades. He poured resources into giving dignity to those society ignored, because he knew behind every weary face was a story, a lesson, perhaps even another Daniel waiting to be heard. The city that once admired Alexander for his wealth began to respect him for his heart. Yet he never claimed the change as his own. Whenever asked what had transformed him, he would hold up the broken watch, smile softly, and say, "A man who had nothing taught me everything. He fixed what I couldn't." And though Daniel's voice was gone, Alexander carried it with him. At charity events, in quiet conversations with his daughter, even in moments alone staring at the skyline, he would hear it echo, "I can fix it." The cry of a billionaire met by the wisdom of a forgotten soul had become a story of redemption, proving that the greatest riches are found not in towers of glass, but in hearts willing to heal. Alexander had spent his life mastering numbers, contracts, and empires. But in the end, the lesson of Daniel outshone them all. Sometimes, the people the world overlooks carry the keys to the locks we cannot open ourselves. Sometimes, the broken fix the mighty. And sometimes, the words of a homeless man echo louder than all the gold in the world.